What is going on, guys? How you doing? Welcome to the channel. Today I want to talk a little bit about narcissistic personalities inside of the entertainment world. The DJ business had something happen recently and it kind of sparked a flame, so let's get into it. That's right, guys. Once again, welcome back to the channel. Scott King. I run a DJ company over here in Orlando, Florida, www.djsorlando.com. I also have a coaching business, www.coachscottking.com, where I help people be able to, break free, build out their own business. And I use NLP, hypnosis, and internet marketers in order to build my business to where it's at now. And if you want to learn more about that, the website is right here, www.coachscottking.com. And today, I just wanted to talk a little bit about surviving toxic personalities in the DJ world. This is my guide to protect your career and mental health. I got to, kind of explain that I was in a certain spot and I didn't realize there was answers for what was going on. And then when I started doing some research and finding out personality types and how they operate and how they think, I was able to create freedom, by understanding basically emotional intelligence. And I have a whole module on the website if you want to learn more about that. And once I learned about that, I was able to take that information and transform it into sales, because once you understand how people think, you can make language patterns become more natural and then make sure you get win-wins and being able to close more sales. And again, I've had significant growth throughout the years, and my passion is to help other people to understand what is going on when they have certain types of conversations and how to deal with it and what to do next. So with that in mind, let's just go to the next slide here. Narcissistic personality types is basically what I kind of wanted to focus on. So the narcissistic pattern in the music industry, right? It's kind of like high stakes, right? So in order for you to survive, you need to kind of deal with people who have the gigs, and narcissistic personality types are the forefronters. They're the ones that can put on a show, and they usually become entertainers, and then they just take that facade and they use it even with their employees or how they run their business. And let's just see what we can get into a little bit. So recently, a DJ went unpaid for like 3 months for a gig that he did, and that wasn't like the initial agreement. It was more like, I'm going to pay you X amount of dollars before you do a gig, and then I'll pay you the rest of it the Monday after. And that's kind of the scope of what happened, right? So after that, it was like this pattern repeats across clubs, festivals, and agencies. It just kind of depends if you're smart enough to ask the right questions and not get yourself too deep into water and not being able to find a better path for what's working best for you. And this is kind of like something to look out for when you're dealing with narcissistic personality types. And then one thing to keep in mind is that you're not going to be able to be pretty good at it in the beginning, and the true colors will actually show once you get further into the Venus flytrap. So just kind of keep that in mind. And this is how these people operate, kind of like, so it's not like you're going to be able to change it or out muscle it or outwork it. And then there's so many different things that are going on. So let's see if we can break down a few of those things. The initial hook, right? Building a false foundation. Narcissistic personality types are masters of the first impression, right? They'll approach you with exactly what you want to hear. Something to keep in mind, right? Excessive compliments and, promises of prime gigs, either festival slots or industrial connections, right? I'll be able to do this for you, so that, gives them, it's like them sending out a line, and they're going to see who, kind of attracts towards that light, right? So that kind of builds a false foundation, building a relationship on the desire to please and succeed in the industry. And then we have this thing called frame control, where their whole goal is to control the narrative while your goal is to impress them, right? So just kind of keep that in mind. It's like you're following their trail of breadcrumbs, and they're leading you into a dark path, which just becomes more of their world. And then there's like trapdoors and things inside of it. So again, the initial stage feels like you're being tagged along for an exciting opportunity, and you better, FOMO, FOMO, fear of missing out. So you'll have to follow what I'm telling you in order to get to that next stage of all these wonderful things that I have for you, right? So here's some red flags to look out for. Blame shifting. So once you get a little bit further in, you'll be promised certain conditions, and if you're not aware of what blame shifting is, or gaslighting, sympathy as a weapon, or creating their own equation, these are things you want to keep in mind, because you want to make sure that you walk into a situation with your best foot forward. And if you can understand what these different concepts are, you'll be better equipped to catch them quicker so that you don't get too far into the trap door. So what's a blame shift, right? I couldn't pay you because the client didn't pay me. And this shifts responsibility. Don't blame me. It's the client that didn't pay me. Aren't they just the worst? I'm still trying to be your friend, but you're still good for the next gig, right? They'll blame the venues or the clients or other DJs. Oh, this other person, took this shift, so I'm not going to be able to pay you type thing. And don't blame me. Blame this person over here. So they're not taking responsibility for the commitment that they made to you. Just keep that in mind. That's one of the things, blame shifting, right? And with that in mind, with a grain of salt, always take responsibility for your own actions. So if you do something, it's not you being misled, it's just you learning, right? So yeah, that's what I did. I won't do that next time, that kind of thing. And then of course there's gaslighting, which seems to be running rampant these days. That's not what I said about the payment schedule, which makes you question, what they said to you and begin with. And when I was going through something like this, I was like, man, I got to have an audio recorder around me the whole time. So anytime I come back, to what they said, they're going to say, oh, that's not what I said, or you're just making this up, or this is all in your head, this isn't reality. Don't you know I always try to do the best I can for you? Which leads to, sympathy as a weapon. I can't pay you because I won't be able to make the rent, which wants to pull on your emotional, sympathy in order to feel bad for that person, even though you did everything in your, power or your goodwill to make sure that you were good by your commitment, that you have to hold the other person responsible for their commitment, and uses emotional manipulation to make you abandon legitimate payment demands, right? So remember, this is a business. I mean, if the other person can't pay their rent, that's not great. Well, maybe they should have fail safes to make sure they're taking care of their talent, right? Because they can't grow a business if they don't have people to work for them, that kind of thing. And, here's the thing with narcissists. They're going to create these own equations, is what I call them, in their own reality. So if you start to jump into what their reality is, instead of like questioning it and cross-checking it, then you're just in their world, and then you're, just tagging along. So another thing to think about, when you're using NLP, right? We have this thing called the meta model, and we have these things called anomalies, or if you've ever heard somebody say something like, everybody knows this. Everybody? Really? And then it starts to get a little bit uncomfortable when you start questioning what this equation is, and yet you need to know this information so that you can make the best decision for yourself. So again, universal quantifiers, if you want to look that up, and what NLP is, but basically it's when they use words like everything or all, and then your mind, of course, doesn't like a closed loop, so you want to make sense of this. So again, you're just another trap inside their world, right? So the example here is everybody in the industry knows payment comes after the event, which creates false universal rules. They use words with absolute language to make their serving practices seem more standard. I'm the or they can use prestige, right? I'm the professional. You should listen to what I have to say, right? And then they'll turn it around and be like, I'm doing all that I can for you, or I'm doing the best that I can for you. I had something like that happen to me, and then I turned it around and said something like, well, can you list off 5 things? Oh, you're just so difficult to work with. That kind of thing. So keep that in mind. What do we got going on the next slide here? So some red flags, right? Boom. These AI images are great. After you start setting your boundaries, they're going to start casting you as the enemy. So this is exactly what happened, right? The guy did the show. He was supposed to get paid the Monday after, and then he didn't get paid till 3 months later. So, this deserves a conversation. So we're going to sit down and we're going to have a talk, and we need, to figure out what happened, right? So moving forward, you don't want this to happen to you again. So you're going to say, hey, look, this is what happened. I don't need this to happen again because, I've got rent too. And then what about all the other opportunities to other people that I turned down to do a gig for you that probably would have paid me on time, and yet I'm still stuck with you because, I'm a man of my word. I'm a man of my word, and then you didn't pay me the 3 months afterwards, and there's probably a few other strikes or things that happen where your spidey sense goes up, and you want to bring that to their attention as well. Now just remember, you want to do this in conversation and not in text, because that'll turn into them understanding the material how they want to understand it, and yet not understand that you have your best intentions in mind. So you want to do this mostly with a conversation, because that's what happened when I advised this DJ recently. I was like, hey man, if this is what's happening to you, you have to decide whether or not this is a good fit for you or not, or if you want to keep dealing with this. And it's really a judgmental thing to call somebody a narcissist, yet if you understand what the language patterns are, your mind will start to drift into that path. And again, with the meta model, is this true? Is this person going to say things like this? Do they really care about you? Do they care if you set aside your personal time to work for them, and yet you're not paying them until 3 months later? And moving forward, what would make the most sense? Well, since you've triggered these few things, what about you just pay me before I do the show, because I don't know when you're going to pay me, that kind of thing. And then again, these people are not, if they're a narcissist, they've lived their whole life like this. So it's not like you're going to be able to change that personality or get them to, see your side of things if it's too far down the road. And then of course, these types of people are going to have, we'll call a narcissist an alpha, and then they're just going to search for betas to be around them because they don't want to be challenged, and they want to be, Googled in God, because they can, make things happen for other people type thing, and not even care, about the needs of the other person other than what they can get out of them, which is kind of funny. I went to go see a stage hypnotist, and he was talking about narcissism, and he said something like, yeah, my ex-wife called me a narcissist. And he said something along the lines of, I care about people. I care about what I can get out of them. So just keep that in mind. It's not like you're going to change the other person. And you got to make sure, if you're dealing with this type of person, with that you have a contract and, things out in writing. And then if it comes down to it, you're probably going to have to either cut ties, or if you went to a court or something like that, that would probably be too much effort, time, and money. It would probably be best just to cut ties and take whatever loss you have. And we all have our losses to deal with type thing. So back to the slide, right? Red flags, casting you as the enemy. Yeah, once you start to set your boundaries, you're going to be considered the enemy. So the moment you set your boundaries, you're labeled difficult to work with. It's like a Sith-like mentality. Either you're with me or against me. Can't you see all the things that I'm doing for you? And then we have the self-preservation, or the self dignifying. Well, I've seen a lot of DJs, and I know which DJ is the best, and you're not even that good. So you're going to have to start comparing yourself to other people. And then, you should just be worried about your own mental health and making yourself better the next time you go out and do a gig. And then we have dismissal and invalidation, which could be a reasonable request. Hey, look, you've kind of burned me in these last two things. Moving forward, I'm probably going to need payment before the gig, or at least, I'll show up to the event and I'll be set, and then I'll start playing music as soon as the Zelle comes through, or something like that. And this is just you protecting yourself. And if you're labeled as the enemy, or difficult to work with, or I couldn't get to the phone in time to send it to you, then that person should have made personal arrangements to make sure that their event was covered. Because you could not play the event, and who's it going to hurt? It's going to hurt his business, especially if you're not like a full-time employee collecting like a weekly check. And if it comes down to that, do you really want to be in this situation to begin with? So just kind of keep that in mind. And then again, being painted as the enemy. Oh, why are you rushing me? Like, can't you see I'm doing everything I can for you? And then we have what is called gold post shifting, which goes something like this, right? So I know up front I told you I was going to pay you $500, but moving forward we're going to pay you $300, and that's me doing the best that I can for you, because I'll be able to get you more gigs because of the lower price point. It's something that happened to me, and it wasn't even like discussed, like, oh, hey, would you be willing to do more gigs for less pay, but I'd be able to get you more gigs, and then that would help you out in the long run. No, that person just made that decision, and then kind of moved forward. And being in the state of Florida, we all work for different companies and stuff, unless you own your own company and your own person. But most DJs are just kind of pickup work for different companies, and that's a ploy that was used on me. And at the same time, why would I want to work less and do more, especially let's say it was a weekend gig and I can make more money doing a wedding, which could have canceled out all those other gigs of working 5 days for less. So, and again, if this isn't brought to your attention or agreed upon, then you're considered the person that's difficult to work with type thing. So these are things just to kind of keep in mind as you move forward and see if you're falling into a trap door. So validation seeking, right? The psychology impacts on the DJ after this stuff's already kind of wore you down a little bit, constantly trying to prove your worth to somebody who's designed a game that you cannot win. And then, all right, you're always chasing your tail. You're just in a loop trying to, pin somebody down for something that they said they would do. And then it ends up not being that. And they say something like, well, you just misunderstood what I was saying to begin with. I didn't really mean that. And if you don't have an audio recording of it, then you're not able to go back and disprove whatever happened to begin with. And besides, again, like I was saying before, these people are just painting a reality that they're living in, and they can change it whenever they want. And you're not going to be able to outmuscle that, because that's what I tried to do. And then we have identity erosion, right? Beginning to doubt your talent, or if you're even good enough, or you're good enough. It starts with DJing, and then it's like, well, am I even good enough for life? Will I be able to equal up, to what it is? And then, you just want to be better than yourself yesterday, right? If you're a good fit for this company, then they'll keep using you. And if you're not a good fit, then maybe it's best to part ways. Or if there's an agreement for you to get trained to get better, at least be clear on whatever those agreements are. So just kind of keep that in mind, right? All right, so now we have the trap door, and this is something that I want you to be, very mindful of, because this kind of messed me up. So when I was with this other company, there was a big, heavy portion of payment that was coming to me, and I was relying on that money to be able to live my standard of life. And it's not like I had built up a company or anything like that, but yet I had, rent, kid on the way, that kind of thing. And I kind of needed that money to survive. And that's what the narcissist is preying off. Like, oh, you'll have to do what I say if you want a weekly, checks to come into you. So with that in mind, I can either live my life underneath somebody else's thumb, or I could build my own business. And that's what I ended up doing. I told the guy to stuff whatever he had coming to me, and then I just went out on my own. And that's why I have the business that I have today. And then, of course, some action steps. What can you do, right? So the basically, right, you want to confront and reframe, which attempt one honest conversation to set clear boundaries. And I value our working relationship, but I need guaranteed payment moving forward, right? So I know you did the best that you could, and I understand that, yet still I have my own obligations, and why am I holding myself a date if you're not going to pay me for it anyway, when I could be dealing with somebody else that might even be more beneficial to my situation? And then know when to talk. If they refuse reasonable terms, be prepared to walk away, because that's the thing. That's probably what you're going to have to do if you're dealing with a narcissist, right? And then hold your standards. They may label you as difficult, but you don't have to accept that frame. And that's something that I teach a lot in the NLP. If somebody labels you as difficult, well, I'm sorry you feel that way. If getting paid on time seems like being difficult, then maybe this isn't a good working relationship. And then, of course, you want to protect yourself. So get contracts, require deposits, and maintain documentation, all agreements. And then when you're dealing with a narcissist, you let them know you're recording everything. That's why I have a recorded line on my phone. If I have to deal with a venue owner who's a narcissist, when they call me, it says all calls are recorded for training and whatever else it says. All calls are being recorded for training and quality assurance, that type of thing. So, and then that'll keep them on their toes, right? So last, right, creating a professional code of conduct. Payment terms, deposit amount, payment timeline, and acceptable methods, right? Communication standards, response times, preferred channels, and documentation practices. And then, of course, work conditions, equipment requirements, set times, and performance expectations. And then, of course, make sure this is a win-win for both situations. And then, of course, we have relationship boundaries. How do you expect to be addressed, treated, and respected professionally? Top DJs aren't just talent. They're excellent at establishing and maintaining professional boundaries. Your worth isn't determined by how much mistreatment you can tolerate. And this really does speak back to the whole reason why I have a business and a coaching business to begin with, because most people don't even realize this is what's going on. And I want to at least draw your attention to it so that you don't get too deep into the hole and have to do what I did, because I thought I was building a great relationship by building out somebody else's company, not realizing I didn't have any control of the new bookings that were coming in. And if I didn't have any control of the new bookings coming in, how was I going to be able to maintain a steady growth of income, especially in this fast-paced moving world? And guys, if you need help with anything along the patterns of what I was talking about, and of course growing your own business, make sure to visit me on the website www.coachscottking.com.